Hello, everyone. Welcome to our March Advisory Council. We are so excited to see you all today, and we are looking forward to a wonderful conversation with you all. I'll be passing it over to the commissioner in a moment so we can get going and start the meeting. And we have a couple teams here from EEC who are excited to share their work in the new year. So. Commissioner, passing it over to you and welcome everybody.
Thanks, Eugenia. And typically we would have everyone put their name and title in the chat, and it would be good if you did that, not just to the panelists, but to everyone. You can. I'm not seeing exactly how to do that, but Eugenia, maybe you can help. I see just host and panelist option in mine.
You can change, so if you hit host and panelists, the drop down, you can change it to everyone.
Okay.
And then you should be able to send it to everyone who is attending and to all the panelists as well.
Seeing that, but hopefully someone else can figure it out better than I can. Okay, good morning, everyone. First, I want to just say that we are pretty excited about celebrating International Women's Day on Saturday, and also Women's History Month. And I'm thinking a lot about my grandmother, who taught me about the power of public service when I was very little, and also her brave acts to support women's productive freedom when we didn't even have words for that. And so I'm thinking about Mariana Kershaw a lot this morning, along with many of the other women, coaches and mentors who cleared the path so that we could have the opportunities we had. Since we last met, the budget has come out, and we didn't add that to the agenda this morning to go into great detail. But Eugenia, can you just link to the board meeting deck from our last board meeting where we went into some detail about that? I'll just hit the quick highlights. It is a great budget for EEC and continues the progress in early education and care at nearly 1.7 billion, fully funding our C3 program. We anticipate fully funding our current caseload so that we'll be able to continue to serve all the families that we're serving through our new procurement that have come into the system, and increasing caseloads that we're seeing in DCF and DTA. At this point, we're not anticipating being able to open income eligible voucher access necessarily at the funding levels we have, but we are serving more kids through child care financial assistance than we ever have, and are committed in the administration to making sure that we support continuity of care for all those families, and we'll be incredibly closely tracking availability of resources, and of course want to open access like all of you do as quickly as we can if it's possible. A couple of other watch areas around the Career Pathways program and making sure that we're supporting all new and existing educators in that program going forward, and working with our colleagues at Higher Education to do that. This afternoon at the Workforce Council, we'll be talking a little bit about a new loan repayment program that we're pretty excited about, working with our Department of Higher Education that's funded through FY25 funds that are available in this budget. So excited about that. Many of you are probably also aware, and if you have additional questions about the budget, happy to come back at the end and talk a little bit about that, but encourage you to look at the board meeting where we walked in some detail through sort of the line items and some additional funding that the governor proposed through a supplemental budget, which includes surplus funding from the Fair Share Amendment, which would provide an additional $100 million to the agency to continue our progress around workforce development, access and affordability, and supporting work which we expect to come out of the Early Education and Care Interagency Task Force. On that note, we are not hosting a March board meeting, but in lieu of that, we will be working with our colleagues at the Executive Office of Education and Economic Development and Labor and Workforce Development for a report release for year one of the task force. So I don't know if Lauren Cook is on, but thank you for hosting us for that release event next week. We're looking forward to hitting that milestone, talking a little bit about what's in the report and what the work lays ahead for the task force a lot of incredible commitment from secretariats and agencies across state government to learn about and support early education and care. So thank you to all of you who participated in the listening sessions. I think it was an incredible opportunity for folks across state government who don't focus on early education and care to really learn about the power of what you all do, we all do every day, and its impact on the economy and future educational opportunities for our young learners. We did host, and I thank Eugenia Soilis, and for those of you who had an opportunity to participate, a dedicated Know Your Rights training for folks who are worried about and interested in learning about their rights relative to law enforcement and particularly immigration enforcement actions. It was in multiple languages. Eugenia's probably already put the link in the chat to the recording of that in multiple languages. We are still working with the Attorney General's office on targeted and specific guidance for the early education and care sector. We'll closely track to the Know Your Rights training, as most of you are private businesses and in some cases private homes for our family child care providers. So working with that Attorney General's office and the Governor's office to get that released soon. And finally, I just want to do a couple of quick introductions. So for those of you who haven't met, although you may have met her through the task force, I'm really pleased to introduce Gabby Santana Goldstein, who is our new employer partnership manager. She's here on the call. She's joining us from the Executive Office of Economic Development, where we had the opportunity to work with her on the task force and have been so fortunate to be able to hire her at EEC in this new position that will be working both in partnership with our employers to make sure that they are working collaboratively with us around supporting their own employees, childcare and early education needs, as well as sort of partnering around state efforts to expand access and affordability. And then a second important part of her portfolio is really thinking about how we leverage the business resources out there, especially for small businesses, for our early education and care providers who are small businesses and should be able to avail themselves. So Gabby, do you want to come off and just say hello to everyone this morning?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I've met some of the folks on the Zoom while I was at my previous role within the context of the task force, and I'm thrilled to be able to do this full time in terms of my my focus area. So thank you so much, and thank you in advance probably for the time and support I will probably ask of many of you on this call throughout the work, because we certainly have to do it together. So thank you for having me, and excited to work with all of you.
And for those of you who'll be joining the Workforce Advisory Council, we'll spend a little bit more time talking about Gabby's work and engaging with that group. So I know some of you serve on both. I have one more introduction, but I want to just pause for a second to just recognize what's happening at the federal level, and so many things worrying all of us, our friends and colleagues working in the federal government, partnering with us, services and supports across federal and state services that we are all tracking very closely. I will just focus a little bit on early education and care. We are in general working very, very closely with the Governor's office and the Attorney General's office to really take things a step at a time and fight the chaos, which has ensued across. So we are working as much as we can with our federal partners to understand we don't have any information about direct impact on childcare and early education. Obviously, we're working incredibly closely with our Head Start partners and standing in solidarity with them as we understand what impacts there may be there. So our commitment is to continue to take things a step at a time, to work again with the Attorney General's office to fight the things that step at a time as necessary, and to stay in community with all of you and communicate when we understand what impacts may result, either from executive actions or other things that are happening at the federal level, or the potential government shutdown looming over us March 14th. So we will stay in touch with all of you and expect you to be in touch with us also. But as the governor has said on many occasions, we are sticking true to our values here. We will make sure that we continue to take advantage of every federal dollar that's available for Massachusetts and for Massachusetts families, and not put those at risk at the same time that we hold true to our values and continue to focus on our work here at hand. Again, happy to take questions or thoughts about that, and recognize the anxiety, both at EEC and across our communities, about all the actions that are being taken. And I guess I just want to say for a second about there's so many things to be worried about, but I think in particular, and I said this at the board meeting, that the attack on public service and public servants is something that has been a particular concern as I think about all the incredible public servants at EEC and that I've had the opportunity to work with over the year. And I just want to lift up and value the hardworking public servants across our communities, keeping water safe, keeping our environment protected, keeping our parks open, and all of us licensing early education and care programs and serving families and communities. As I said, we will stay together as we navigate these waters. Helen, I have a couple more things, but do you want to jump in
said,
here?
I thought you asked for questions. Sorry.
Sure. Okay. I just want to lift up one more thing. Speaking about incredible public servants, I wanted to share with all of you a promotion at the agency. So many of you are familiar with the work of Amy Checkaway. We are so incredibly grateful and fortunate to have her at EEC. And I'm thrilled to announce that she is going to be moving into a new role, a promotion as Deputy Commissioner for Policy Strategy and Research. I don't know if I got the order of those right, but in that role, you know, Amy has been leading our efforts at the agency to really create a meaningful data analytics and research capacity aligned with our policy work at the agency. And we have built really a brand new team with incredible talent. You'll be hearing a little bit from them today, but you know, Ashley and Adrian, and you'll hear from Greg maybe a little bit today. We have an incredible team that Amy has built in this brand new division, and has really been able to advance the field by making sure that we have current up-to-date data and research about what's happening in the field, about the impact of our programs. And in no small part is that an impact on sort of the additional investments we've seen happening in early education and care. So this promotion is incredibly well deserved, and I'm so happy to be able to work with Amy on a day-to-day basis and her team. We are also going to be moving our strategy and project management team over to work with Amy. So we really think about her team as kind of supporting organizational effectiveness, whether it's data and research, analytics, bringing policy, and all of our project management and strategy work together. So Amy, congratulations. Thank you for being willing to play this leadership role for us and continuing to help make sure that we are an evidence-based and research-driven organization.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's a privilege to work at EEC and with everyone here, both internally and externally.
And our brand new data advisory committee under Amy's leadership, and many of you will be supporting that. We are launching that in the next month or so. It was originally scheduled for the day we now have our Joint Ways and Means Committee hearing. So working on a new date for that, but Amy, really grateful for your leadership. And that was going to be a natural transition to the first agenda item around our key performance indicators, which has been something that Amy and her team has been leading. But Helen, if you want to jump in on a question first, we can go ahead and do that.
Actually, I'm glad you said that about Amy, because I'm thrilled that she's doing this. I know how capable she is. I've worked with her, been on committees with her. So that's fantastic. Congratulations, Amy. I just wanted to ask, how much of the EEC's budget comes from the feds?
So at the risk of getting too deep into this or too far ahead, about a third of our overall kind of funding comes from federal sources. But it is a block, most of the Child Care and Development Fund is a block grant that comes to the state, and state government appropriates funds to the agency, which then we spend. And there are complicated ways that it's spent from EEC and also across other state agencies that we then draw down those funds. So, even with a government shutdown, those funds have already been appropriated to the agency. Obviously, it depends on how long that shutdown lasts and what the longer term impact might be. But because those funds are appropriated, we are not expecting immediate impacts on our staff or on our ability to pay providers because of the way it works. We also receive pretty significant funding through the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Block Grant. And that works the same way, which is that the state funds appropriated, and the state funds are appropriated, and then we draw down federal funds after we've expended them. So we're in a slightly different position than some of our colleagues who like SNAP or Medicaid, where they're funding programs, and we worry with our colleagues about those programs as well. But we are in a sort of a different situation for the way childcare and early education is funded.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Kate, go ahead. Oh, you're still on mute somehow.
And I apologize. I don't want to
Morning.
conversation. Good morning. Thank you for letting me ask you one question, which isn't so as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, is the EEC doing anything differently about any of its public facing materials or other? Do you understand the source of my question?
Yes, and I just want to say personally for a second that there is longstanding research that supports the strength of organizations, that a diverse organization that draws on experiences, economic diversity, racial and ethnic diversity, that the research is very, very clear that a diverse organization is smarter, stronger, and more productive. And not only am I a believer and ascribe to that research, but 20 years in state government, I've seen it directly firsthand, that in all the organizations I've worked with, that a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, particularly at the management level, but across the agency, that ensures that the agency is representative of the communities in which we live, work, and serve, makes an organization better and stronger. And we are continuing our work. I really see the commissioner as the top diversity, equity, and inclusion officer for the agency, and will continue to lead from that position. We also hired our first diversity, equity, and inclusion manager, Jasenia Burke. Maybe some of you have had a chance to meet her. So she is facilitating and leading. We've just created our first diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging council at the agency. And that work is really focused on both internally, ensuring that we are building a sense of belonging and connection for those who work at the agency, that we are hiring a diverse workforce that is reflective. And their work is also going to be externally facing to ensure that our policies and procedures and regulations reflect the voices and experiences of those we work with in the field. So we are continuing to live and work our values through our words and our actions at EEC. You're going to hear some work later on from Aisha Rodriguez talking about the work we're doing on a family advisory council. So we remain incredibly committed to making our organization as strong and responsive as possible through our efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I appreciate your question, Kate.
So I just want to thank you, actually, for standing up and being counted. I think many of us are getting questions from funders and board members and other things. So I wanted to understand where you all stand. And I think many of us on this phone call will thank you for standing up for the right things and not sort of reflexively responding to things that are out there. So thank you.
reflects our values, and it reflects the direction the agency needs to be going in to be stronger and to continue to improve the work that we do. So thanks for your question, Kate, and happy to have any further conversations about that as well. Trying not to share any outrage. I'm just going to stay on the facts for now, but you can probably hear it below the surface. Okay. With that, I want to say one of the things that the research team has been doing has been making sure that there's data accessible and available to all of you, to all of us, to other stakeholders. And again, I think that has really helped advance the field, continue our sort of professionalization of the field, and make sure people are aware. So we rolled out an initial set of key performance indicators and dashboards, and we've heard lots of great feedback from you and also internal stakeholders at EEC, and we are going to continue to work to improve those. So Amy, turning it over to you to talk a little bit about where we are on our KPIs.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, everyone. We are really here primarily this morning to provide a brief update and make sure there's awareness of what we really see as a foundational structure that we have put in place and are continuing to develop so EEC can track progress and we can all look together towards our strategic goals and make collaborative decisions that are informed by all the data we have. So today, our Senior Director of Data Analytics, Adrian Murphy, is going to provide just a quick overview and update about what progress we have made to date. Again, so the council is aware, so folks listening today and watching later can know that this information is out there. If there's time, can answer a couple questions or hear a couple pieces of feedback, and really encourage folks to reach out, and I'll make sure the contact information is available to our team about suggestions on both the current state and where we should go next. So Adrian will take it from here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Amy, for the introduction. And I'm excited to be here today to share a little bit about an update on EEC's commitment to identifying a set of key performance indicators or metrics that we're using to track progress on our agency strategic priorities. I'm hoping in a short amount of time we can sort of do three things today. The first is that we can share, maybe for the first time for some of you, or in many cases a refresher about the KPI dashboards that we launched in the fall, in October. And I'm hoping then we can really emphasize, secondly, some of the updates we've made to the dashboard in the spirit of continuous improvement and continual refinement of the dashboards. And then finally, I'm hoping we can have at least a brief discussion or get a little bit of feedback about either how your organization has or might be able to use the dashboard, as well as any feedback that will help make the dashboard more relevant and valuable to your work day to day in the field. So maybe go to the next slide. Before we dive into the dashboard itself, I want to flag that sort of this endeavor has three big picture goals. The first is we wanted as an agency to identify a set of key performance metrics, some quantifiable metrics that we could use as an agency to monitor our progress against agency priorities. Secondly, we wanted to then visualize and create a tool to be able to track those key performance indicators, hence the dashboard that we'll share a little bit about today. And then thirdly, we wanted to increase transparency and public access to both the KPIs and then other data metrics that are important around the health of the early education and care sector here in Massachusetts. So to do this, thanks. To do this, we developed a set of key performance indicators across three of our strategic priorities: family access, program stability, and workforce support. We started with these three priorities because they're the areas where we have the most data readily available now, but we also plan to continue to add additional priorities as the dashboard evolves and as more data becomes available. In our first iteration of the dashboard, we in the family access space, we identified KPIs focused on the proportion of children statewide enrolled in formal early education and care broadly, as well as the proportion of children from families making under 50% of the state median income who are enrolled in childcare financial assistance. For most of these metrics, we work with an external vendor to combine data from the census with data from CCFA and enrollment data from C3 to give us a full picture of who is and is not being served in formal early education and care and in our financial assistance system statewide. We also, in the family access space, that have on the dashboard data around the number of children on the wait list for financial assistance, including breakdowns by region and age group, and data on the childcare financial assistance caseload over time, again, broken down by funding source and region. And new to our most recent update in February is some data around the proportion of programs that participate in CCFA, either by having a signed voucher agreement or a contract with EEC to provide childcare financial assistance. So we're really excited to be able to add some of that information to the dashboard. In the program stability space, we have data both on the number of licensed and funded programs statewide, as well as capacity over time, and also data on the number of program openings and closings by month. So we can see whether or not that growth in our license capacity is due to increased program openings or a decrease in program closures, and understand those dynamics a little better. We also new, as of our February update, have added data about our licensed residential and placement programs, both the number of programs and the capacity of our residential programs, really to help us better understand that key component of our early education and care system. And then finally, in the workforce space, we've identified KPIs both around the size of the workforce, the approximate size of the workforce, which we get through monthly C3 applications, as well as educator wages by role, which we updated in our most recent February update to also include breakdowns by licensing region. So we can have a finer grained look at wages, not only by role, but also by region. If you want to advance to the next slide, great. So this is just a further deep dive into sort of what's new in the dashboard in February. You can see some of the visualizations at the right. But I want to emphasize that I think, as I noted at the outset, we've been approaching this dashboard work with a really iterative lens at EEC, that we were excited to put a public-facing dashboard out in October, but continue to both add new metrics as well as new filters and interactivity based both on feedback internally from teams at EEC, as well as external feedback. You know, I said to our team yesterday that this data is only as good as it is valuable to both teams at EEC and folks out in the field using this data. And so we want to make sure that we're continuing to solicit feedback and continuing to iterate on this dashboard over time. So you'll see here some of the new data that we put out on the dashboard in February. As I mentioned before, data on the percent of programs who are participating in the child care financial assistance system, as well as new data on our licensed residential and placement programs. We've added region filters now to all of the visuals, either allowing users to filter by subsidy region in the case of some of our child care financial assistance related data, or licensing region related to our program data. And then also tried to add some tools to help make the program openings and closings visual, easier to navigate. I think also there's a link here in the slides to the dashboard itself, and I think maybe both Amy and Eugenia put that link as well in the chat. Yep. And then this is just sort of a snapshot of the new CCFA program participation data that we recently added to the dashboard, and excited to share that not only do we have this on the dashboard, but we're now able to see that almost 500, upwards of 470 more programs are participating in CCFA than were participating about a year ago, showing, I think, the increase in participation in that system, and obviously a metric that we'll continue to track over time as we continue to build more longitudinal data in this space. So I know that was a whirlwind overview, and I think we hopefully have a few minutes left. I'd love to hear a little bit from the council members about Either if you've used this data, if were familiar with these dashboards and have used this data in the past, what has been useful to you, or if this is new to you, what do you think might be useful to you in the future? And also if you have any feedback about how we can continue to make the dashboards more valuable to you as we move forward in future iterations, either by adding additional enhancements or displays or even new indicators and metrics. I think, Amy, do you mind? Yeah. Perfect. I'm sort of curious if folks were familiar with this before or can think of ways that this might be helpful to them in their work. Yeah, Marissa.
Hi, Adrian. I've been using the dashboard a lot actually, just in I think monitoring some of our, I don't know, our efforts at EEC and being able to communicate what you all are doing. We've gotten a few requests for things where I've been able to refer them to the dashboard, which has been really helpful. And I just wanted to kind of flag something that I know is a significant kind of departure from where the dashboard is now, but maybe would be something for you all to think about as you kind of continue to iterate on it and build out functionality. So I think this statewide, current capacity information and the percentage of children that are enrolled or participating in licensed care, that information has been really helpful for people. We've also gotten a few requests for that at sort of a local level as well. So I think like the regional specificity has been helpful, but as you all can kind of build towards like a more granular community-based level, I think that would be helpful for folks. And then I think also like potentially building out an additional data set, thinking about 85% of the state median income as well, and being able to compare to that data point in addition to 50% would be another helpful piece. But overall, it's been nice to be able to refer people to something whenever they have a question, which has been good.
Marissa, that's really helpful, and both two things that have been on our mind and are on our list, but hearing them and hearing from you that that's valuable to you and to your work is affirming and helping us prioritize it sort of across a long list of potential enhancements. So that's really helpful. I should also have mentioned in the sort of local drill down space that we are also working to make the data in some of these graphs downloadable, and the downloadable program data has more information about programs. So I think that's another piece that's top of mind for us, is thinking about how we help folks sort of dig that next layer deep on some of these metrics. So I know we're, I think, maybe a little bit short on time, but Kate, I want to make sure to get your comment.
Sorry, this is just a complicated interface. I love that anything that you can do more on the regional pay scales is super helpful, because we're all in this together, and that's really helpful information.
Great, that's helpful. The new release includes a breakdown of the wage data by region, but I think, based on your comment and Marissa, your comment, I think there's more thinking that we can do about how to make it even more sort of local and relevant. So appreciate the feedback. Maybe I'll wrap up with two things. First, I realize
one more question.
Oh, one more question.
Go ahead, Kim.
Apologies.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Great dashboards. I geek out on data from time to time, so it's so good to see it. After working so collaboratively with the department over the years to make this a reality. I think the one thing I'll put on the dream board, the vision board, is as the data comes together and we're thinking about what's downloadable, being able to provide a local report to our municipal leaders would be invaluable. So I haven't thought through all of the exactly what's, but we spend a lot of time trying to wrangle data around early childhood to be able to share at tables where the municipal leadership is listening. And so it would be really helpful. I can see it also helping our legislators just kind of understand the picture in their backyards. So
thank you, Kim. We agree, and I love the term dream board. I might use that soon. But I think some of these things really are possible, and get really committed to continuing to enhance both, again, sort of what we're able to see and also sharing it publicly.
Yeah, and Kim, that's a great comment too. We were recently meeting with the city of Lynn, and we had the mayor and many of our providers and their delegation with us, and we had to come back and sort of pull together from different sources, or what does it look like in Lynn across our different, and I think they were really eager to have something like that, and it does make sense. So we'll work with the team to figure out how to do that at the city level, town level. And just want to celebrate for a second. I mean, I'm so happy to see our res and placement programs, which I think we don't talk about as much here, but recognizing they're a really important part of our infrastructure and our system, but also not just having the data on the number of providers that are participating in CCFA, but celebrating for a minute the incredible increase in the number. So I think it was about just over 50% when I first got back to EEC, and now we're up at 70% of providers participating. So rate increases and C3 and many of the things that we've all worked on in partnership, I think contributing to making it better and easier to do business with EEC. So happy to see that reflected in the numbers as well. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, speaking of childcare financial assistance, many of you are aware that the FY25 budget, there were a number of outside sections for the agency that directed around workforce and childcare financial assistance and other things. And one of the new requirements is that we increase income eligibility, initial income eligibility for childcare financial assistance from 50 to 85% of state median income, as well as a few other things. So we are complying with our statutory requirements and the statutory timeline associated with that. So Tyrese, will you just mind walking through the folks through some of the changes that we're proposing through regulation and the timeline for people to give feedback?
No problem. Good morning, everyone, and I hope all is well. So just following, we can go to the next slide. Following what the commissioner just shared is, in our
Tyrese, do you know, you're like echoing, so something funny with the audio.
What about now? I'm still echoing. Now? No echo? Got you. Thank you. So good morning again. I'm just going to go over a very high level what's happening regarding CCFA changes to our regulations. So as the commissioner shared in our FY25 budget, there were some outside budget sections related to the codification of CCFA, of some of the new requirements. And within that, codification really means writing it into formal law. So essentially taking our childcare financial assistance policies with some additional requirements and actually going through the formal process to promulgate those into state statute. The promulgation will essentially allow EEC the ability to update our childcare financial assistance policies and procedures. Those changes, next slide. The changes that they're requiring us to actually codify are three changes. The first one is expanding eligibility for childcare financial assistance up to 85% of SMI. Many of you know you have advocated and pushed for this change along with us, and so in the budget section, the outside budget section language, they're codifying that change. And then the second one is codifying some existing priority populations into our regulations. I'm just going to highlight that there is only really one population that would be new, which would be adding priority access for early education and care staff. We currently do this, but now it would actually be written into our actual regulations, including families experiencing homelessness and families experiencing domestic violence and parents under 24, which is also known as young parents, and then families with a child with a disability. Those last Those last populations are currently in our regulations. And then this other one is codifying CCFA income so that it doesn't count in other public assistance programs. Now, far as we know, this is not our childcare financial assistance isn't counted in any other programs, but this will ensure that if there is a public benefit program out there that is counting childcare financial assistance from families, they would no longer be able to do that. And then the last one is not necessarily a change. It's requiring us to just continue to do the work that we're already doing, continuing streamlining our processes and our paperwork, updating our technology, and making sure that we're expanding outreach and that we're taking into consideration families that don't speak English, right? So ensuring language access. What is our timeline? Next slide. So at the January board meeting, we received the board's vote to move forward with the promulgation process. And so we currently are in the public comment period. It opened February 14th and it will close. Comments will be accepted through April 15th. And as you can see here, we're going to have our public engagement event on April 13th. That will be from 6 to 7:30. And so if there are any questions or public comments as it relates to the changes that we're proposing, you could come there and submit your comments, and you also can do that formally by going to our website. I believe Eugenia will put that in the chat. Once we get through the public comment period, the board will have to review the public comments and make and vote for the regulations to go to promulgation. And then we'll have new regulations into effect. I know you're going to ask, when will we increase eligibility up to the 85%? It would be after the regulations are promulgated and we're able to implement them. We'll include them in our policies and in our procedures. Any questions, or did I miss anything, Commissioner?
Just probably noting that there are also IT changes for those of you who have the joy of working with CCFA right now, and hopefully a future state function. So even if the regulations are promulgated, we'll have a future implementation date that will allow enough time for policy and procedure development, as well as IT and system changes. And obviously at current funding levels, we're not anticipating being able to reach a lot more families at the higher income level yet. So no adverse impact on families at the moment to any delay in the regulatory implementation.
And of course, with any change to CCFA policy and procedures, we would also engage with our policy working group as we're developing the policies to align with the changes. Laura?
Thanks, Tyrese. And this question is actually for the commissioner as well, just linking this 85% eligibility change, which many of us have advocated for, is very important. But in light of current realities, I just want to link this conversation back to the budget conversation, Commissioner, in case we run out of time at the end. I just think it's really important to have a conversation about what level of advocacy and how we are going to re-engage the conversation around income eligibility. It's wonderful to think about increasing eligibility to 85%. We have 30,000 families currently waiting, higher than any time since the pandemic, for income eligibility at the lower 50% income eligibility. So to square that circle, and the impact is huge. If there is not any supplemental funding in FY25, if there is no outlook, Commissioner, based on what you're saying in FY26, that will be close to 3 years of waiting for families on the income eligible waiting list. And we understand DCF and DTA are still flowing, but that leaves a huge swath of families, particularly working families, with no recourse, whether it's because they can't get in or when they lose eligibility currently. And I want to underscore that it's not only a threat to the families themselves, but it's a long-term and now I think current threat to the sustainability of our supply, particularly in the family childcare space. And while there is some money in CPPI in the governor's budget, that will target very specific communities. And as we all know, some of us in CPPI communities, people don't always find care in the community where they live. So I just wanted to at least reopen that conversation and see what the thinking or conversation is about not becoming inured to the fact that we just don't have money for income eligible, but keeping it as a conversation topic, because we're going to choke off our childcare supply, and more family childcare, small businesses in particular, will suffer through lack of enrollment. So I'm really worried about the long-term supply chain, as well as the direct and immediate impact on families.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I don't think there's really a question there, but more sort of a statement of the facts of the current situation. And, I think we are pretty grateful that the governor's budget included $100 million new dollars in childcare financial assistance. We've enrolled a lot of new families. The transition to the new contracts and ensuring continuity of care has been a major priority for the agency. And so retaining all the families and continuing to support all the families that we have enrolled over 24 and 25 into 26. And as I said, there's an additional supplemental budget that the governor filed that would continue to support access and workforce development and other needs across the system. So I think this administration is really committed to ensuring access and affordability. We'll see more of those conversations coming out of the task force as well, even in a constrained revenue environment, which we're certainly in at the moment. So we are partners with you. I'm hearing a lot of the same things you are, and worries for our family childcare providers as families move on to, school age or go to school, that there aren't vouchers coming in behind that can keep our programs viable. So we will, along with you, continue to communicate what we're seeing and hearing and what the data is saying on the waiting list, as well as what we're hearing from our community processes. So thank you for raising that. And I know everyone is in agreement with you, Laura, about the concerns about what the constraints in the childcare financial assistance, at the same time that we are serving more families at higher rates, thankfully, than we ever have. So I'm also grateful for that, just putting a pin there too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kate Marie.
Thanks, Commissioner, and thanks, Therese. We just a quick question. When these went out for public comment, we must have missed it because this is actually all of the YMCA's we're trying to figure out where this went out. So did it go out in an email, or I apologize, it's probably on our end, but we're just now playing a little catch up.
I don't know how it gets posted. Eugenia?
Yeah, I was gonna say, go ahead, Eugenia. We just talked about sending out an email too this morning, but go ahead, Eugenia.
Yeah, we just landed the day for the public comment period last night. So we will be sending out an email to folks so folks can either get the details to submit a comment in writing or come and join us on April 3rd to provide live public comment. We talked about it on our board meeting, but no formal notice went out. It was just posted up on our website and sent to the Secretary of State to start that process.
Thanks, Eugenia.
All right, so we'll get something out so people know exactly where and when they can participate in the actual meeting around it, if they want to do verbal comment, or where to participate and where to send written feedback to.
Yeah, we also put it in the chat for you.
Great. Okay. I want to move on to talk a little bit about the preschool development grant. Most of you are aware that we have had a 3-year federal grant, $36 million, $12 million over each year. That's really around system building, and have an opportunity we wanted to share a little bit with you. I am really proud of the work that the team has done on this, and I'm going to turn it over to Arjun Shah in a minute, who's been kind of our lead project coordinator and manager, but so much more than that around the preschool development grant. But the preschool development grant has really worked to kind of like pour accelerant on many of the things that we've been working on, whether it's our credential, thinking about childcare financial assistance, and you're going to hear specifically about two very important parts of that today. One is our Family Advisory Council, which is something we proposed through the preschool development grant. We have staffing and a plan for that we're excited to share with you. And then a requirement to do a needs assessment, which has provided us with some really important information about sort of how we look at the system going forward. So looking forward to having to share with you a little bit about how we've approached that work and then dive deeper into two key pieces of it. So Arjun, thank you for your leadership. We're grateful for all the catalyst work that you've helped facilitate across the EEC and with our partners.
Thank you, Commissioner. Sorry, I sat waiting, ready to talk. Lost my voice. Thank you, Commissioner, and glad to be here, everyone. So I'm Arjun Shah. I am the project manager for the Preschool Development Grant here at EEC, and we'll do a quick overview and talk about how EEC has been shepherding this work over the last 2 years, and then, as the Commissioner said, dive deeper into those two projects. So on the next slide, just wanted to first start with an overview of the grant. It is $36 million over 3 years. We are entering our third year of the grant. And I've included here the federal goals for this grant. As you look through them, you'll see that they're pretty broad. And in many ways, they align to what our department's been working towards the last few years. You'll see building and supporting the workforce, maximizing family choice and knowledge, expanding access, improving overall quality, many things that we have been really pushing forward as a department already. And that really makes it a great opportunity for us to take PDG and put together a strong plan for how we use those funds and move towards the goals that we really set for ourselves and meet the federal goals as well. On the next slide, I'm giving a pretty high level overview. This is high level, but also complete. It covers everything we're doing with the $36 million of PDG. We are in our third and final year right now, so you could imagine that some of this work has already been completed, or at least the PDG funded portion is completed. Nothing really ever ends, and so some of it is shifting back to the state to carry forward as we go forward. But those are in the left column here. And then there are other projects that are still underway. We have a goal to complete those projects by the end of the year. One thing to note is that there's a possibility for this work to continue into 2026, but we are working very hard to wrap that by this year. Two major things to point out. Sorry, can you go back to slide, Virginia? Two major things to point out as we look at the projects. One, we really want to take a strategic approach to what is temporary funding. And that meant making sure we invest in projects that have a lasting impact once the grant ends, but also projects that end. And so that means you can see a lot of system design work, things that are focused on development, things that are focused on pilots throughout the projects that are here. You'll also see that projects are organized into our department's 5 strategic pillars, and that is by design. Many of the projects we've shared with this group, with the board in the past, are really core parts of our agency's group, and that this work is, the PDG funding is sitting underneath that to really fuel many of the strategic priorities that we have as an agency. Just out of interest of time, I'm not going to go into the deepest detail on any of these projects, but they are here, and you'll have these slides. I just want to finally, on the next slide, call out a unique aspect of the work that comes with the Preschool Development Grant. We've really been using this to create an opportunity and work together with interagency colleagues and use that to move towards shared goals we have across the state. And so here are 4 different groups that we have directly shared funding with through PDG. We're working with DESE on literacy screening and a pre-K to kindergarten transition toolkit. We're working with our DPH colleagues to really understand what the health and safety needs are across programs and explore health consultation models. Much of the apprenticeship work that we've talked about in the past is done in direct collaboration with ELWD. And then finally, the STREET initiative, our trainings for trauma responsive practice were done in partnership with the OCA. And so just highlighting how great of an opportunity this is, we get to share funding and joint ownership for projects. And that's really important because, especially as we think about the governor's attention to an all-government approach, and think about all the ways that we can benefit from the extra capacity and expertise that comes from the other organizations. I think we often think that we have our hands all on different parts of the elephant of this larger, broader challenge of childcare, and PDG has been a really great way to have tangible funded partnerships with our colleagues. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Aisha to talk through our first project we're highlighting. This is sort of a higher level overview of an update on the Family Advisory Council, and then I'll come back in a second to set up our research team to talk about a deeper dive into the findings of our needs assessment.
Hi, everybody. I just have to say it is beautiful out, and it is apropos that we are going into spring, a time of blossoming. And guess what? That's what's happening right now. Our efforts to put together a Family Advisory Council are coming through the seed stages, and we're getting ready to see some blossoming about to happen. So I'm happy to walk you guys through some of the progress we made and what's coming up. You can go to the next slide. So part of the purpose of the Family Advisory Council, Family Advisory Councils aren't new to everyone, right? We've heard of them before. We've done a lot of work in connecting with organizations and even across states, and of course in Massachusetts, who already have existing councils, to really look at what would an EEC Family Advisory Council look like in its most meaningful form. And of course, we know that that requires informing policy and program decisions and really elevating parents' voices and how we're embedding them into the work that we're doing across our programs. We talked about the fact that there's so much, even on this meeting, so much work going on kind of behind the scenes, so many challenges, so many successes, but the families have the experience front-facing, right? So they're experiencing the after effects of our decisions. And so it is absolutely imperative that they be at the table, and we know this. I must say that I have the fortunate experience to work across regions, and so hear a lot of the feedback coming from communities. But in addition, I have the fortunate experience to really join EEC at a time in what I'm calling the glow up era. So I have 3 millennial children, daughters, who talk to me about, Mommy, do you know all about the glow up? And so I'm kind of using that to this experience, because we really are taking family leadership voices at EEC and how it's informing our work across our systems and programs and policies to the next level. And part of that is how we're bringing parents in. And when I use parents, I'm talking caregivers, guardians as well, to really optimize connections with high priority families, because families are each other's best resources at times. And so how are we prioritizing their voices in the community to create that double feedback loop? How are we getting our messages out to the community and getting community's messages back to us? Next slide, please. So the composition of the council, or the proposed composition, and we're really interested in your questions and your feedback, because that will continue to help inform our process and decision making. We're talking membership, we're talking representation. So of course, the membership of the Family Advisory Council will all be family members, so parents, caregivers, providers. We're really looking across, we service all families, of course, but we know that some families have marginalized voices. And so how are we really lifting up the voices of the high priority families as well? And what does that look like across regions? We want to make sure that there's representation from across regions. We know that families in rural settings have a much different experience than families in city settings, regardless of culture. But we know that culture and language and race also bring, its own experiences into the dynamic. And so how are we looking at a very broad outreach? that is an equitable process, that is inclusive. And the commissioner talked about the fact that we're standing by our commitment to our core values, and that does include an inclusive process for families. But then as well, family structure. So many of our families have different experiences, and that includes with themselves and with their children. Some families have children with special needs. Some families, the parents themselves, have special needs or a disability. And so what does that look like when it comes to the table? And what does that look like across each category umbrella of our work? The commissioner talked earlier about the fact that our residential work, we don't talk about it as much as we're starting to. And so how are we continuing that and pull voices from families in that community, as well as early ed and after school care, out of school care? We can go forward. And so, our goals, if you take a look at this slide, you'll see a lot of things, but what you're really going to see if you look really deeply into it is really families as influencers, families as decision makers, families as key contributors and key stakeholders, and a link that threads conversations throughout key stakeholders, including other families, educators, state, leadership, and how we're informing legislation. Additionally, I wanted to point out the fact that in terms of promoting family engagement, it really does involve a sense of empowerment. So families have to feel empowered to sit at these seats at the table. And part of what that looks like is some professional development and how we're supporting families and having the tools to advocate, the tools to have some of these conversations. And some parents already have that. They have leadership skills already embedded in the work that they're doing or trainings that they've taken. But how can we add to that? So part of our cross-representation is that some of our families are going to come in and they're going to be really, strong in their leadership skills. And some parents are going to come in and have never sat at a leadership table before. And we need that kind of cross range of skills, abilities, and talents so that we can build in an opportunity for parents to learn from each other, mentor, cross-parent mentoring opportunities and building. I wanted to say also just really quick that it's not just enough that we're sharing information, and this is where the family advisory is really going to be helpful to us. Sharing information is just a part of it, but meaningful connection is the most of it. And so how we're sharing information and connecting around the information we share and making meaning together is huge. And once again, that's where parents are really going to come to the table and support EEC in our work at the agency across our own pillars, but also outside of the agency across communities. Next slide. And so here you can see our focus areas. We absolutely intend to thread the family council work throughout, each body of our work, as I said, but all throughout our focus areas as well. And again, it goes to what that looks like in terms of getting a diverse representation of families with experiences. And I do want to talk just really quick about really scaffolding resource supports. Part of the professional development is really about supporting a sense of anticipatory guidance. How are we preparing families? We're scaffolding the supports for families with us to be successful in a leadership experience. And that really goes to a sense of belonging. I would be remiss if I did not bring this up. Belonging in one of its truest forms is really, much of it is by unspoken agreement. Everybody can say, oh, you're welcome, here, and you belong here. And, but it's not really what people say that makes you feel belonging. It's what you feel inside. And a lot of that has to do with you eliminate the kind of like sense of permission. It's not, we allow you to belong here, but this is actually truly where you should have been. This is actually truly where you should be, and you have a seat at the table. And that's the state of belonging that we are committed. That's the proper word. Absolutely committed to, filling in our advisory council with. That's the kind of state we want to bring the Family Advisory Council in. And it does empower families that much more. And we're going to be very intentional about language as well. And I'll get to that in a second with our design team. Next slide. Thank you. So as you can see here, we have this fabulous timeline. And, you know, much of the work has already been done in the terms of the conversations that we've had to have. Erjun talked about like the cross-agency opportunities to collaborate, which has truly helped to inform the work that we've done so far. Myself, Tyrese, and also my Associate Commissioner Hajai Shira on the Family Advisory Council, but there's much yet to do. So we've already presented to our fabulous leadership team and the commissioner, of course. But we're going to have the opportunity to present to the board. And even excitingly, coming up are some stakeholder engagement opportunities. So from this month to next month, we will be working to have some visioning sessions with communities. We know that communities talk about silos. Massachusetts has strong siloed communities. People tend to kind of stick with who, you know, many people who have moved to Massachusetts have kind of talked about this with me. You know, we move here and it's like, if you don't already have a group, you're kind of left out. So what does it look like when we kind of open the portal to really have some cross-community collaborative conversation? And so we're going to be doing that in a bunch of visioning sessions coming up. So we're going to hold a couple that allows people to give feedback on what they want from an advisory council here at EEC. And then on top of that, we're going to have some really targeted focus groups. So that could be with program providers, that could be with families, and also EEC's agency. We know that there are, you know, expertise at the table already. We're not trying to recreate the wheel. We're trying to refine the wheel for maximum success. I wanted to also point out the fact that I did not say this before, and I should have led with it, lived expertise. And that's what families are bringing to the table, no matter what their positions are in the professional world. It's not just that they have lived experience, but there's expertise that comes from that lived experience that doesn't always get counted for, but we're making room for that, absolutely. And then we'll, you know, develop from these visioning sessions. Part of what's going to come out is the development of a family advisory council design team. So it's a working group. And this working group is really going to come together as a nice think tank. A third of the design team will be families. We committed to that. And then from there, we'll have some programming staff and educators and community members, and they're going to work with us to make an equitable application process, which will allow us to do the outreach, and then finally in October be able to launch the Family Advisory Council. And I love to take any questions or comments if you have them.
Hi, can I jump in? Dodie Swope here. Aisha, I'm so excited. I can't even. Dodie Swope, Together for Kids Coalition out in Worcester. We're a coalition of over 200 folks out here in the city of Worcester. Kim Davenport is our chair. We are building a family advisory council for our coalition. Right now, many of the parents are being trained by a collaboration between our CFCE, Worcester Family Partnership, and our Worcester Community Connections Coalition, which is funded through a number of places, but also has a strong connection to DCF families. So we're seeing those families being trained right now, and we also have worked a lot with Strategies for Children and their advocacy network. So we're really excited that I think we're going to have some really strong families out here in Worcester helping to advise us as a coalition. But we would love to think about what's the bridge, like could we have a seat at your statewide advisory council, then to be able to bring that back and forth to our Worcester-based family council. So I just got so excited I had to jump in right as soon as you stopped talking. Would love to talk with you more, and you know how to find me. So Aisha, thank you. This is so, so, so important.
No problem, absolutely. And what I can say is that so far we've got a lot of interest. And so there's definitely opportunities to connect, and I'm happy to connect with you offline as well. And whether it's the working group or there's just so many different areas where folks can come together for us to cross-collaborate and kind of join together in these kinds of conversations. Thank you. And then I think I see Jessica.
Yeah, and let me just say, we have one more pretty substantial agenda item that we've wanted to share with this group for a long time. So I don't want to wait another quarter before doing that. So Jessica and Aisha's, this work is just really kicking off, although they've been in the design phase for a long time. So Aisha can be available too to have further conversations about this. So Jessica, quick, and then I want to make sure we get to our needs assessment work, because I think you guys will all be very interested in that too.
Hi, thank you. Aisha, so my question is in regards to recruitment for families. If you could just tell us quickly how you guys are doing that, and also who is gonna like run is this gonna be the department running these meetings and things of that sort? Because I'm in committees and there's a lot of pressure on the committee members to do all of the work and schedule all of the logistics and administration. So I'm just wondering what that looks like. Thank you.
So we will be having a consultant to help support that work, because to your point, it kind of tends to fall, into kind of like already busy hands. And then part of the recruitment process, a consultant is going to support us in talking about that as well. And again, I'm available offline for additional questions and happy to talk through it more.
And why don't we plan to come, we will be in process by the time this group meets again. So anyone interested in participating directly or has more feedback for Aisha, please contact her directly. And we'll put this on the agenda for the next advisory council so we can stay in touch with you on where we are in the process of it. Aisha, there's a lot of interest in your work. Well done. Thank you so much. It's really exciting milestone for us at the agency to be getting to do this, and really enabled by the preschool development grant. I think we had the commitment, but not the capacity to do it without the support of that. So, all right, Ercan, you want to turn it over quickly to introduce our researchers and and I'm sorry to cut it off briefly, but we are going to do this at our board meeting too. And so we'll have a little bit in April. So we'll have a little bit more time.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. So just before we dive in, I have one slide to talk about the motivation behind this work, and we probably will be going over time. If you can stay, please stay. There's lots of opportunities to ask questions. There's a lot of depth in this work, and of course, it'll be on YouTube if not. So just very quickly, we are required as part of the preschool development grant to conduct a needs assessment. We took a requirement into a very meaningful opportunity for ourselves to really lift voices of families and better understand what the experience was on the ground. And so the goal really here is to understand what families are experiencing and use that to better align and do the work of the agency in a way that meets that need. We had 4 goals and research questions that really were baked into the work. What are families using to access care? This first goal, what are the trade-offs they're making? Second goal, where are they learning about care? How are they finding care, and what information do they use, and what's driving their need for care? The third goal, understanding what is most important to them. And then fourth, really working to understand what families see as working well and what they would really like to be different. So with that, I'm really happy to introduce our research team. Folks here today are Aaron Baumgartner, Michelle Thompson, and Jessica Goldberg. They are from MEF Associates and the Tufts Interdisciplinary Education Research Group. That might have been wrong, but they'll correct me on it. So they have a few slides to walk through, and they have the floor.
Awesome. Thanks,
Ercan. I think maybe we could go like a few minutes over, but not much, just out of respect for everyone's time. So thank you in advance, Aaron.
Yeah. We'll see what we can get through, and then we'll have the full presentation in April. So let's go to the next slide. Just to give you a brief overview, as you can see, we conducted a survey and focus group for the needs assessment. So the survey allowed us to go broad, whereas the focus groups really allowed us to go deep. We did both activities in multiple languages, and it included a mix of both personal or in-person and virtual data collection. We also want to thank the many people who helped make this project a success. So this includes our own advisory group that comprised family members and providers. There were also a lot of EEC staff, CFCEs, and other community organizations who helped us with recruitment. Some of you are on the call today. Thank you very much. We can go to the next slide. So just briefly want to tell you that we were excited about the geographic spread of the data. So as you can see, In the map, we were especially excited to collect information from typically under-researched areas like Western Massachusetts and the islands. And our goal from the beginning was to gather feedback from a diverse group of caregivers. And I won't get into the details today, but we were very excited to see that our samples were comparable to the state population in a lot of ways. We'll get into the details in April. We can go to the next slide. So we're gonna spend the rest of the time today sharing as much as we can about the results, which are organized into these 4 main sections. We can go to the next slide. The first section, as you can see here, is focused on the childcare search. So I'm just going to briefly tell you a little bit about why families searched, how they searched, and the outcomes of their searches. So as you can see here, more than half of the survey respondents wanted to start a new arrangement sometime in the past year for their youngest child. This included caregivers in the darker 2 slices of the pie, about 37% who searched in the last few weeks or months, another 19% who searched in the past year. And then you can see there's about a quarter in the gray slice who reported never wanting childcare or searching for childcare because they had only ever wanted parental care. And we'll come back to this group in a minute. Next. So why are families searching for childcare? I think not surprisingly, most caregivers are looking so they can work, and you can see that in the top bar, which shows 72% selected this response. You can also see that about half of the families, 46%, search for childcare so they could provide their child with educational or social enrichment opportunities. About a quarter reported wanting care so they could have some relief. So I don't think those are particularly surprising. We were interested to understand more about the families who did not search for care. We learned about these families in the focus groups, and you can see in the bullets that some of these families told us that they wanted to stay home with their child to bond or be present for developmental milestones. Others expressed concerns for safety or the large costs that their family would incur by attending a formal childcare setting. Caregivers also expressed a desire for better online search tools. And so this slide shares some findings from the focus groups where we heard caregivers had used online search tools but found them to be limiting. So they expressed that the lists were too long and often lacked key information about critical information like whether there were open slots, the hours of operation, or the cost. And ultimately, a lot of caregivers ended up relying on informal sources like friends or families to fill these gaps. And the survey also suggested that caregivers wanted more information. So about 80% wanted more information of some sort. And you can see in the bar chart that about half said it was difficult to find information about availability, quality of care, and cost, and about a third found it difficult to find information about schedules. We also heard that caregivers who searched for childcare had trouble finding the care that they wanted. So the survey showed that about half, or 42%, of families who searched for care couldn't find it. Caregivers gave up. They stayed with an existing provider or said that they were still searching. And we found that families who were financially secure had more success than those who were financially insecure. And I just wanted to flag it. It's not necessarily surprising, but it is concerning. And these trends were consistent with what we heard in the focus groups as well. Arjun, I don't know if we should you want to say?
Yeah, just to quickly interject here. This has been, I think, a particularly meaningful section for us. And as we think back to the goal of understanding how we can use this to better support our work, understanding the findings on childcare search has really helped us organize next steps for supporting families. So we're looking into ways that we can better build systems and guidance around supporting families in their search. And that includes CCR&R, CFCEs, and then, of course, the centerpiece of this is our online childcare search directory. I just wanted to really connect the depth of data that this team's been able to collect and how that's shaping the work that EEC is doing.
Michelle, I think.
Thanks, Arjun. Yes, so we'll move to our next section to talk a little bit about how caregivers are making decisions and weighing priorities when selecting a childcare arrangement for their family. So on the survey, we asked families about the characteristics that they were most important to them when picking a childcare arrangement. So they were asked to select the top 3 operational characteristics that were important. And as you can see highlighted in pink, safety and cleanliness rose to the top, followed by cost and location. Then caregivers answered which 2 provider characteristics mattered most to them, and having a provider that was supportive and engaging with children and had qualifications or experience were the provider characteristics that caregivers selected most frequently there. Finally, caregivers selected the top 2 opportunities for child development that mattered most to them, and learning social or emotional skills and having opportunities to play and explore mattered most, again, as you can see highlighted in dark pink. Caregivers who participated in the focus groups reported similar priorities to survey respondents, and in our focus group discussions, we heard the nuance of how these priorities and preferences played out in the real world. We found that caregivers' decision-making followed a general pattern shown in this decision tree on the slide. So starting in the dark pink box on the top left corner, caregivers described looking for childcare that met what we're calling basic needs. So taking what they could get as long as it was affordable, safe, and and available. So availability was a challenge across focus group participants, where physical and psychological safety were particularly important among families living in lower income areas, and affordability was particularly important among families with multiple young children and whose income levels were just over the fiscal cliff. Moving down, if caregivers found childcare arrangements that met their basic needs, they then described looking for convenience factors, which included things like location, being close to home or work, or in close proximity to public transportation, and also longer operating hours. So looking for early mornings, late afternoons, summer, school vacation, and so on. And now moving to this final dark pink box at the bottom of the chart. So beyond meeting basic and convenience needs, caregivers also spoke about what they would prefer if they had the chance to be more choosy. So we called these values-based factors. And while only a handful of families we spoke with were actually able to choose their arrangement based on those factors, many families shared what their values-based preferences would be if they were to find themselves in that situation. And these included things like communication between the provider and caregiver, teacher experience, emphasis on learning and structure, and individualized attention and care. That last one, the desire for skilled and qualified providers who could individualize attention, was valued by everyone, but felt particularly critical to caregivers with children who had special needs. And while families had preferences for a variety of care types, about 70% of the sample selected that they would enroll their youngest child in center-based care if it were free. And this trend stood true across age groups, including for families with infants and toddlers 0 to 3 years old. We also wanted to see if this would hold true based on the current care arrangement that families were using. So looking at the dark pink bar on the left side of the bar chart here, you can see that families who are currently using center-based care and desired center-based care. So again, looking at this bar, you'll see 91% of caregivers in that situation wanted it. So there's great alignment there. Looking at the other dark pink bars in the graph, we can see that caregivers who are using other types of care would also prefer center-based care at slightly lower, but still high rates of 62 to around 70%. However, looking at that last set of bars, the caregivers who are already using home-based care with a provider or family child care were about as likely to select family child care, the lightest pink bar on the far right, as their preferred setting as they were center-based care, indicating that families using family child care value family child care. So while preferences for care types varied and many people had multiple preferences, we can see that families are really largely navigating to select care types that they're satisfied with. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jess to talk about childcare arrangements.
Thanks, Michelle. Keep moving. Keep rolling. It's just, you can see here, this is from the survey. It's a distribution of the types of arrangements that families had. And you can see that only 30% there at the far left reported using parental care only, and the rest were in some kind of arrangement. On average, they reported 1.5 arrangements with an average of 1, or with a range of 1 to 5. And then you can see that about 1/3 of the sample used childcare centers, about 1/5 used home-based care with friend or family, and then only around 1/10 using family childcare, home-based care with a provider. Okay, next. turn to the childcare journey. So this was really the bulk of what we did during our focus groups. We asked each caregiver to complete what we're calling a journey map, which outlined their experiences with childcare, other early childhood services, and family milestones, asking them to focus on one of their children. You can see here we have a mock-up of the activity. And then what we did is we used Excel and SPSS to sort of organize all the data from these journey maps and run descriptive statistics to identify patterns. And that's what I'm going to talk about next. So we identified 5 patterns. What we did is we used the maps of the 41 participants out of the 105 whose child was at least preschool age to identify 5 journey types that reflect most of the participants' stories. And they kind of provided us a concise way of understanding key aspects of the caregivers' journeys. And just to say very quickly that for these 41, we used really strict parameters that allowed us to assign one person to each journey type. But our understanding of these journey types is informed by the stories of all 105 participants who reflected on their experiences, often with more than just the one target child they completed their maps for. Okay, so first, we have mostly seamless formal childcare. It's our first type. Representing about a third of this smaller sample, these caregivers were generally able to find the formal childcare settings that fit their schedules and needs for most of their child's early childhood. Next, we have our cobbled together group, representing slightly more than a fifth of the sample. These caregivers couldn't find or couldn't afford the full-time formal childcare they wanted, and so they had to kind of cobble together multiple arrangements, usually both formal and informal. Next, we have our parent care not by choice. Note the frowny face. This group is similar to the cobbled together group in that they couldn't find childcare that worked for them, but unlike the cobbling group who are kind of blending formal and informal, these parents ultimately are just opting to stay home until their child could get into public preschool or kindergarten. And then we have our parent care by choice. Note the smiley face. Sometimes they were motivated by the same sort of lack of affordable options or the realization, for instance, that their entire salary would go to childcare, so why bother? These were parents who actually opted to leave their careers for now, and they tended to be more satisfied with their situations. And then finally, we have the friends, family, and neighbor care group who forewent the formal system entirely in favor of informal care arrangements with people they had personal relationships with. So for the next couple of slides, we're going to focus on these first 3 types because 1, they were most prevalent in our sample, and 2, because they're also the kinds of types that feel most relevant to the work of the EEC. Formal care because it is perhaps most aligned with what EEC hopes families desiring childcare experience, and the second 2, because they're perhaps the most concerning in that these families want but cannot find formal arrangements that work for them. So what we've done is we've selected family stories that best illustrate each of the journey types. And I'm going to kind of use these case studies to walk you through some of the key features of the journey types. And before we move on to the case studies, I just want to note where each type fell on the income continuum. This is important. So as you can see, folks in the formal childcare, they tended to be on either end of the income spectrum, while the other 2 types kind of hovered right over the eligibility cutoff for CCFA or childcare financial assistance. Okay, so mostly seamless formal care. We actually have 2 case studies. This one, which is for a 2-parent family with a higher income living in a suburban area. And the next one is for a single-parent family with lower income in a rural area. We felt like it was really important to show what formal care can look like in Massachusetts for families on both ends of the income spectrum. You're not going to be able to read all this, and I'm talking really fast. I recognize that, but you will have access to these slides, and you can take these in at your own. So, one final at the bottom of the slide, you can see quotes from the families, key quotes. So we're going to start with Flora and Peter. Flora stayed home with her baby for the first year, supported partially by paid leave. This was their choice, not because they couldn't find a care arrangement. During the pandemic shutdown, they did a nanny share with friends. They found a family child care center around the corner from them next that felt perfect, albeit very expensive. Dad said it was like a second mortgage. And then they moved on to a center, again, expensive, but they could afford it for preschool and pre-K. And they could handle all the school breaks just fine because mom worked as a teacher in the same school system. So thinking back to that flow chart Michelle described early, this is a family that had enough choices, enough resources, enough work flexibility, and as the family pointed out, a good dose of luck to be able to have more of a choice to kind of make that values-based decision. Now we turn to Julia, also a formal journey type. She lives in a rural area of southeastern Mass. She stayed home with her baby for the first 2 years while living at her parents' because she couldn't afford her own housing. She was using SNAP and TANF, not working at the time, so she didn't have her child in care. When her baby turned 2 and she went back to work as an administrative assistant in a multi-service center, she lost some of those means-tested supports because her pay was too high. But the program she was working for helped her to get a voucher for the childcare center that was in the same building. Julie was also struggling at the time with substance use and mental health issues. When she sought help, a DCF case was opened, and though this initially terrified Julia that her child would be taken from her, she ultimately found DCF was really helpful in connecting her with treatment programs and other resources. And she was able to actually go back to school while working full time and get her BA. When she got a promotion in the same service center, she got that moved her to a new location. She was able to enroll her child at the center there, still using CCFA. And then finally, CCFA covered her summer camps, and now her child is in kindergarten. So in both of these case studies we just talked about, there was a neat row of red boxes there at the bottom, 2 really different stories. The first about a family with resources and finances, and they had a relatively easy childcare path. And the second's about a mom who, once she was ready and able to make use of the social services that Massachusetts offers, was able to keep her child in a full-time program she loved, work, and get a college degree. These 2 stories showcase what happens when the early childhood system in Massachusetts really works for families. Now we turn to the cobbled together case study. So Callie's family lives in a rural part of central Mass. She works 9 to 5 while her husband works weekends and overnight shifts, and they are just over the CCFA threshold. Throughout their childcare journey, both parents had to continue to work full time in order to get by. So they got on several wait lists when their baby was born, but for the first 2 years, they didn't get into any of them. Instead, Callie and her husband switched on and off, caring for the baby whenever they weren't working, and relied on a patchwork of family and friends to supplement the times Callie and her husband both had to work at the same time. When their child was around 18 months, they finally got a part-time slot in a family childcare. They weren't thrilled about, but they took it because it was available. It was also really expensive, required changes to their work schedules. About 6 months after that, they got offered a full-time slot in the center they had been hoping to get into, but it was so expensive they could only afford 2 days a week, so their reliance on family and friends continued. The center closed during COVID, during which time they worked from home. A few months after that, the child got into a slightly less expensive preschool, which they could still only afford for 3 days a week. And then finally, the child was old enough to go to public pre-K, but since the family couldn't afford after school or summer camp, they're still cobbling together a combo of parental family babysitter care. So a series of, you see, stacked red boxes throughout their journey. And then finally, we have Miriam, our parent care not by choice story. Miriam's family lives in a suburb of Boston. When they had their baby, Miriam's husband worked 6 days a week, and Miriam worked a 9 to 5 job, but the brunt of childcaring responsibility fell entirely on her. They earned just too much to qualify for benefits, not nearly enough to pay for childcare. So Miriam had paid leave through her job, and then she arranged a schedule where she could work 3 days a week from home and 2 days a week at the office. Grandparents and her husband, when he could, covered the days she had to be at work. Her job allowed her to work from home, but she still had to work that 9 to 5 schedule. So for the first 2 years of her child's life, she worked full-time during the day while caring for an infant who then turned into a toddler. When she had her second baby during COVID, she had to quit her job and stay home full-time. She actually was able to start her own business so that she could have more flexible hours, like be able to work weekends and nights, but she was still working full-time, this time while having 2 young children at home. During this whole period, they remained on child care wait lists, but they never got into a center that was affordable and felt safe to them. And then, like Callie, even once her child got into public school, after school and summer camps were out of their financial reach. And Miriam said she really struggled with depression and anxiety throughout and felt really frustrated by the lack of resources and supports that were available to her. So, and just to reiterate, while we used a really limited sample to assign participants to these journey types, these types, particularly the first 3 we talked about, were really well represented across the entire focus group sample. And they also felt right to the new group. That was our group of childcare providers and families who sort of advised us throughout this evaluation. And really, as we continue data collection for other childhood projects, we keep hearing similar stories, and hopefully they resonate with you as well. So while this was a relatively small subsample, we're confident that these data represent what a lot of Massachusetts families are experiencing. I think we should just actually skip. Let's just move ahead so that we can give Erin
You
a
can
chance.
go to the green slides.
Yeah, let's go to the green slide.
The last section.
Perfect.
Thanks, Jess.
Yeah.
So this section is focused on caregiver satisfaction. And I think what we want to point out is that despite some of the challenges that we've shared so far today, caregivers were largely positive about the actual arrangements that they ended up in. And so this is a success to be celebrated. You can see that in the bar chart here. We asked folks how they would describe their childcare arrangements, and most caregivers, 89%, said that their care was as good as they could have hoped for or better. The next slide has a lot of bars. I think we can skip to this piece and come back to it in April. But let's just go, I think we can end on the key takeaways slide here. Just to say that big picture, we learned that caregivers were frustrated by the difficult search process and expressed a need for up-to-date consolidated search options. They often felt like they had to take what they could get as long as it was available, safe, and semi-affordable. And as Jess spoke, while some of the people navigate their childcare journeys with relative ease, the typical story is more complicated. And caregivers are reporting a general lack of access to affordable options, are piecing together arrangements, and are making career sacrifices. And yet, as I just said, caregivers were also largely positive about the settings they ended up in. And so as we've tried to make sense of all of this information, our big takeaway is that what's wonderful is that so many settings in our state are safe and are places where families feel comfortable. And maybe what's I would say most troublesome is that so many caregivers are having difficulty finding and accessing care arrangements, particularly ones that align with their family's needs and preferences. And so I think we can just close out the PowerPoints. I will hand it back over to Arjun and just say that for next steps, hopefully we will see you in April, as the commissioner said. It has been a real joy to work on this project, and we're excited to share some written briefs that will be coming out soon, which will have a lot more information. So thank you for having us today.
Yeah, I just really want to thank the research team from our end, and this is not the last time you'll see them. We will make sure those briefs and board presentation, we get the full set of depth of what this team has done. Just where this goes next is really, besides the immediate connections from this work, we are really thinking about how this work can inform our 5-year strategic plan going forward. And so that's really where this will start to show up moving ahead. I'll leave it to the commissioner if you want to open this up for questions, but I'm thinking that we're going to have time, but the research team can certainly help out if needed.
Yeah, we're tight on time, and apologies for everyone for going over, but so much good content today and good work going. So we really didn't want to cut it off. And this research is so important, both to the work of the agency, our own work on a 5-year strategic action plan, but also the work of the interagency task force, because I think it gives a very clear view into the experience of families as they're trying to navigate the early education and childcare system. And as we grow it, it needs to be very much sitting on top of the experience of the families who are trying to access it. And some of you are having exactly these experiences as well too. So really, again, the commitment for our team to be data informed as we continue to advocate and make changes within the system as well. So if you all have questions, Amy, where should they send feedback? As always, I'm sorry we're cutting off time because you would make it better. You would ask us questions about what's missing here and what's missing there. And that is really the role of this group, to help us make things better and more accessible and to highlight things. So if you have thoughts about that, we don't want to hold you up today, but we would like to hear them so that as the researchers prepare for a presentation to the board in April, it's based on your feedback and thoughts as well. So great. Arjun adding his and Erin adding hers emails for where you can reach and contact them for ongoing thoughts or comments or suggestions as we prepare for April.
Yeah, Commissioner, this has been a real partnership, both with the research team and also internally across the agency. And so please feel free to reach out and I'll make sure that everyone is aware. You can also feel free, I put the research and data team email earlier. And again, we're working closely with Arjun and everyone else. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much to Jessica and Aaron and the whole research team. And again, to Arjun for your work around PDG, and to Aisha for your great work on the Family Advisory Committee, and to each and every one of you for sticking with us late and in general. So we will see you again next quarter. Don't hesitate to be in touch if you have follow-up thoughts for any of us on any of the items we discussed today. And I know we'll see some of you at the Workforce Advisory this afternoon. All right, take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Happy Women's History
everyone.
Month.
Bye.